morning, nearly afternoon. So my name is Donal Shiels, and I work as a producer and promoter, and I work primarily in theatre, but I also work across different forms, comedy, music, and do a little bit of management as well. And so my job as a producer probably is in three different parts. So I produce work myself. Sometimes people come to me to produce work for them, and then sometimes it can be a kind of a collaboration then between me and other people where we kind of jointly produce. So there's three different ways to what I do.
Cool.
And I don't have a huge, written criteria, rationale, policy document written in relation to how, why, who. Generally, if I like the work, I like the people, and I think there's an audience for it. That's enough for me to kind of go, yeah, this is good. I like this, and I think we can work with the people, that are our collaborators on it. And I'm big on collaboration. I'm big on partnership, because just having grown up working in theatre for a long time, and so have my family. The sense for me is, often hear people make big statements about, well, it's all about the writing, it's all about the actors, it's all about it's not. It's actually all about all of it, and it's everything from the front of house staff to the stage management, to the actors, to the writers, to the designers, to everything. And that's what does make it very, very different. It doesn't work without all of the above. It just doesn't. Cannot do it. I've yet to see anybody produce anything good without all of those things working to their full extent. And so recognizing all of those people for me is very important in the role they play. And I think you get better results out of that. And sometimes that's tough. That can be hard work as well. But more often than not, it's not hard work. More often than not, it's a brilliant profession, a brilliant business to be in. I think often we don't make enough of that. We often hear how bad it is, how tough it is. Don't put your daughter on the stage, Mrs. Worthington. And we're probably in a bad habit of saying how bad it is. It's not bad. It's brilliant. Even though it's tough right now, it's still brilliant. And it's amazing to be part of it. It is truly an honor to be part of it, to see, how some people deliver the work they do, and to see that collaboration in sometimes the face of adversity, as to how people come together to create and make and deliver work for an audience, and the audience playing their role in it as well. I think, again, that's something that's often underestimated. The audience have a huge role to play in the making and shaping of any piece of live work.
Donal, I think the first time you were on kind of my radar was back. I assisted directed in Opera Ireland, Jesus, back in the dawn of time, and you were involved then. But before we get into the producing side, I mean, I think obviously everyone knows you from that kind of vein, but what some people might know is before that, and your start on the stage and your start in the business. Can you talk a bit about you growing up and kind of surrounded by theatre, and how you kind of got into it?
Yeah, so way back in the Stone Age, in when the dinosaurs were around. So back in the 70s, when my father was a singer and he was a civil servant as well, that thing in Ireland, he won the Feshkill Cup as a baritone in 1973. And my mother worked a lot in costume and wardrobe as well. And then my family then got very involved when Billy Barry started her first class in St. Brendan's School in Artane. Her husband had just died, and so she effectively had to open a school in order to survive, I suppose. So there were 20 odd people in her first class. Two of my sisters were in that class, and so a relationship not just with them but with the entire family started. Also, my dad then was very involved, as was my mother, in Coolock Musical Society, which was based up in Chanel College, and they were one of the stalwarts of that scene of the 70s and 80s. Became famous because Bono's dad, Bob, was part of it, and he was a lovely guy. Bob Hewson came from Calderwood Road, and so we were not heavily involved, but that was just in our lives as well. So, and that was a lot of Gilbert and Sullivan, light opera, and the Merry Widow, the Gypsy Baron, all that stuff. And so then myself and my brother got involved, and we were in Billy Barry School from when we were very young. We also would have been in a lot of the feshes and stuff like that years ago. Just came across stuff in the papers about it. I'd forgotten about it, actually, and all the medals and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we were performing from a very early age. So my first show as a kid was as a child. Sorry, was in 1974 in the Gaiety. Maureen Potter, Danny Cummins, Cecil Nash, and it was great. It was great. We did that for a number of years, and then I developed with my brother Vince. We became dancers and professional dancers. So people used to call us the Shield sisters. And we yeah, we had a good time. We managed to make a living out of it because there weren't that many people doing it at the time. And then myself and Vincent did a year with Dublin City Ballet. We never wanted to be ballet dancers, but we did it just in terms of, like, say, training and technique. But we were also big sports fans. So I would have been a big, not a huge sports player, but I played a lot of Gaelic soccer. We lived on a road where there's a green in front of us. So everything from, Gaelic football, soccer, rugby, tennis, cricket, you name it, anything with a ball, we were there, we were involved, and we played. And then we were also active then on stage as well. So that kept going all the way through school. So I was in secondary school. I was then working as a kind of an adult dancer in Gaiety pantomimes and stuff with Maureen, and then latterly then with Jack Cruz as well, and Brendan Grace. And then when it came to leaving school, I did a year in Ballyfermot in radio and television production. Myself and Dave McSavage. That's where I first met Dave. And Philip Cawley, who's on Stay FM, he was on the course as well. Ian Graham, lighting cameraman. And at the same time, I was still working on stage. And then I did a lot of musicals, and I worked a bit in the UK. Came back, worked in television, Sunday Night at the Olympia, Sunday Night at the Gaiety, all that. West Side Story in the Olympia, Grease the musical. And then I started doing a bit of work with John Scott. John was forming his company at the time, and a lot of us were working together, myself and John and David Bulger, David Ganley, all kind of hanging around working at the same time. So I ended up being in some of John's shows, and then it kind of morphed into me managing the company, because I suppose that's probably one of my natural things, a bit of an organizer. You see something and you kind of get involved. So I was in school, I was the DJ in school. I organised the school devs, and music was a huge thing for me. Underlying all of that, I mean, I was going to see all the gigs in the Dandelion Market in the late 70s, 78, 79. So I would have been a big U2 fan when nobody really heard of them. Would have seen their famous, they used to do a Christmas show in the middle of the summer in McGonagall's on South Ann Street. But amazingly, what was the thing about U2 is that it was a great live show, but they weren't the best band probably at the time. There were other bands who were probably better musicians, even had better songs, but there was something very special about U2 at the time that was different to everybody else. They certainly worked hard, and they had a different approach. But it was an amazing time, because there were so few bands, there were so few live venues for rock bands and rock music and punk music. Punk was a big thing at the time. Dandelion Market in particular on the weekends was a great hangout, and Advanced Records on South King Street. Great. There was just this edge and tension around, probably due to unemployment and the economy being in the can. Virgin Prunes would have been part of that, and I was very taken with them. Like, not that you go around whistling any Virgin Prunes songs, but they were an amazing group because they were so visual on stage. They were part installation, good musicians, but they were so far ahead of their game. They were more like kind of a Berlin-esque German kind of band. I remember I saw a show they did in Project in the late 70s where they actually did a full abortion scene on stage, which in the late 70s, like, you probably wouldn't even see it now. But it was just unbelievable to see a band taking something like that on, and as a part spectacle, part visual installation, part music. They were amazing. They really were, but way ahead of their time. And they weren't a commercial proposition whatsoever, but they were amazing thinkers. And so you see now Googie and Gavin doing their thing, latterly still connected to music and arts. So then, when I worked with John, I ended up managing the company then. And very soon after that, I got a call from Opera Ireland to work with them as company manager on their seasons. They would do 2 seasons a year, 2 operas each season. And so I was able to do both then for a while. I was working with John, maybe doing 3 productions with him a year, then doing the 2 seasons with Opera Ireland. And that continued for a number of years. And then I started doing a bit more work in theatre. Storytellers, I worked with them, thanks to Jerry Barnes, actually, and Mary Elizabeth. They asked me to get involved in that. But I loved being involved in opera. Particularly, I did, I think, about maybe 9 or 10 years at Opera Ireland. And it was amazing. 3 different artistic directors, and it was also at a time of transition for the company where they went from being the amateur DJOS company into the professionalized Opera Ireland, and that was a difficult transformation to be part of, and also, you know, the usual issues that people would face about funding, and they were very steeped in Italian opera at the time. So the last artistic director that I worked with was Dieter Kagi, and Dieter was great because he came very much from a European perspective, and he was really ambitious, but did some amazing work, culminating in the production of the Silver Tassie, which as an opera it's probably better as an opera than it is as a play, and it makes more sense to me dramatically and connectivity wise, and I think it was the closest ever to a full Irish cast. I think it was one soloist from Austria. Obviously the orchestra were Irish, the chorus were Irish, all the soloists, you know, and it was a first time ever to work with a living composer, Mark Anthony Turnage. So that was really unbelievable. But there was a stream of work from Salome to Lady Macbeth and Lisensk, the Verdi Macbeth as well. Boris Godunov, unbelievable. I mean, and so that's where we first met. I was very invested when I got involved in the company in bringing as many Irish people in to work with the company, everything from, say, yourselves as assistant directors or the stage management, and thankfully the company were great with that and respected that. And so a lot of people learned a lot about the, you know, their trade, be it as a stage manager or production personnel, but even the singers when the National Chamber Choir were involved. That was great, and it was just great to have opera in people's lives. It was an amazing thing, and the tradition they have in opera is that their dress rehearsals are often free to the public, you know, and there would be a huge clamour for tickets for that, you know. But it was a great event. It was a really brilliant event, and yeah, I've many great memories of working on that. And then at the time, I think I suppose I probably outgrew the role, and then I did a bit of work with Second Age, then I worked with Druid, and then I worked with the department doing the China-Ireland Cultural Exchange for 2 years, 2003, 2004. That was fantastic because it was across all art forms, from theatre to trad music, classical, visual arts, contemporary dance, and, you know, artists in residence, film, television. And of course, the first thing that we came across when we did that in 2003 was SARS. It was the first thing. Myself and Richard Wakely. Richard was the commissioner and I was the manager, and so we then had to bump everything into the following year, condense the whole festival into one thing. But it was great. It worked. I thought it worked, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot by doing it. When you go to the other side of the world to an audience who don't necessarily have English as their first language, and having music connecting people was a real learning lesson. I know it sounds like a bit cliche, but like, for example, when Martin Hayes and Dennis Cahill came over, they knew the instrument, so they saw this violin, but they didn't know it as a fiddle, and they didn't know it and understand like the way that Martin played it as well. It was a whole new opening, and so that was incredible to witness, that somebody who was such a skilled musician as Martin was, and Dennis, to play music with an instrument in that way. They were really taken with that, you know. But so many other great moments, like, you know, the first night in the Poly Theatre in Beijing with Riverdance and Altan, and Kush came over as well with David, and Liz Roach did a residency with the China National Ballet. So IMA brought the largest ever exhibition from Ireland to another country, and that was there for 6 months in total, and we played pretty much both cities, Beijing and Shanghai. David Holmes as well came over, and that was great because you know, he had just come out of doing Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12, and of course the Chinese were like, he was a mega star to them, you know. But he was just a DJ in many senses, you know, and he was a great guy. I mean, I remember being in Shanghai and he was part of a set. I heard this intro and I thought, no, that couldn't be, and it was Jesus Christ Superstar that he managed to work into his set, which then he faded into Lovell Terrace Park by Joy Division, and amazing to be in China having in a nightclub dancing to Jesus Christ Superstar.
Donal, before we go back to or to go on to talking about Patrick's Festival and your future career, like, it was an amazing time in kind of Dublin. You mentioned the Prunes, and you mentioned Dan Market, and you mentioned U2 and all that, and it was an energy there. You're right, and obviously you performing in the middle of all that and kind of being there at the formation of the Billy Barry. That's a lot of Irish kind of culture to be involved in. Do you miss, or did you miss in the early days, that the performing element of your career?
I not as much as I thought I would, and it wasn't a hugely conscious decision that I made, because I was still. It wasn't like I left and went on to do something else. I was still very much involved in the things that I wanted to be involved in, with people that I wanted to work with. So it wasn't as gut wrenching as you might think. You'd miss stuff like rehearsals, which are an incredible thing to be part of, and it's also just amazing fun to be in a room with other people making work, and there's just the camaraderie and all that. So sometimes when you work in administration or whatever, you're on your own a lot, and that's fine too. But yeah, rehearsals are great crack, and I'd still even miss that. And so I love being able to get into a rehearsal room and see people, watch them work and watch how they do it, and watch work evolve all the time. And that pursuit that people have to want to do it better, land it better, time it better, that's great. And so that is, for me, then, in what I currently do, is great, because it really is inspiring to see that, and it's great to get that into your head and read it, and then be able to remember it then the next day when you're back at work at the desk, and why you're doing it, and then the result then when you see an audience connect with that as well, and still the improvement that goes on with some people, that they're always tweaking, making it better, still finding the space, still finding the delivery, to always improve. So it's still great to be part of all that, and I don't miss it as much. I probably missed the physicality, because I would have been like that, if I was involved in, as I say, sport and dance. It is a very physical thing, so I probably did miss that part of it. But it's fine. I think you have to be able to learn how to evolve, and I think in the country the size of Ireland, for the amount of people we produce that are brilliant in what they do in the arts, in the performing arts, it's unbelievable. It's, in many ways, it's not sustainable, but we still manage to do it. We still manage to find a way, and I know a lot of people move away and whatever, but it does change a bit. But what I really like about here is the way it's actually easier to connect with people and work with people, bump into people. That's just brilliant. You don't really get that in other countries. You really don't. And there's a sort of a casualness to it, but it's still working with great people. There's a lot of great people here across the line who deliver really good work. So and encouraging, when you see new either performers or designers or stage managers emerge, I take great heart of that. I take a lot out of working with people on their first jobs or second jobs and helping them. I take great encouragement from it, and seeing them go on to further their career, to work on work abroad or get their film or TV roles. So that's so important, and I think for theatre it's brilliant that I can do that, and it's brilliant that you can also get people that are mid-career or have 30 years experience behind them as well. Sometimes we're not good with that here. We forget that there are people who have vast amounts of experience and huge roles to play, and it's often forgotten about, but we have it. We've got massive depth here of talent, I think.
Yeah. Then your journey into St. Patrick's Festival, I mean, that's kind of, I kind of, from the Chinese experience, I'd say that was brilliant to kind of go into that organization.
Yeah, it was definitely related. I couldn't have done one without the other, and I really enjoyed Paddy's Festival. I did it for 5 years, and it's a tough job. You shut a city down to run a festival. You shut a capital city down. You've got events that are in the order of 500,000, 700,000, 100,000 people attending. 3 TV programs made from it. Sponsorship wise, at peak, I think we were taking about 850,000 euro in sponsorships, it just challenging. The slightest thing, like in my first year on the parade, for example, 3 people got treated for sunstroke. On my second year, 2 people were treated for hypothermia. In the third year, we had to cancel a fireworks show in March because it was snowing and you couldn't get on the river. And I mean, the challenges of outdoor events, I can't tell you how unbelievably difficult it is. It would break you in two. It really would. But what I enjoyed was bringing in a lot of different art forms into the festival, and I think I learned that from China, how art forms can speak to people in so many different ways, be it trad, be it visual arts, be it straight up theatre, and and just music in general. How arts and what it does is the best. It just connects and binds. It's like the best cake ever made, and all these ingredients are in it, and people just keep wanting more, and they don't necessarily often know how to articulate it. But it's highly addictive, and important that we don't forget that right now, which is a tricky time. But it's not going to be like this forever, and it is going to change. And hopefully, there's good news today, and we will be back, and the audiences will be back, and people should know that the research that's been done by some of the venues is that audiences are going to come back. They're not going to stay away.
Yeah.
And I do think that's absolutely critical that people in our business know that. And it's not we're important for the sake of being important, but it is an unusual business to do. I mean, when you think about what we actually do, it is odd. It's very hard to encapsulate it and to articulate it, but it's so needed and really needed now. And people should take heart from that and be ready, is what I'd say.
I mean, I think it's just amazing finds this on YouTube and years to come. We're still talking on the 5th of June, an announcement to be made later on today in relation to the next plans of progression out of the pandemic. And it's been, as you say, it's kind of been a time where, an awful lot of the arts have had to go dormant, but also an awful lot of the public are maybe realizing how much, the arts plays in their life. And I think, for you, Donal, moving on from St. Patrick's Festival, and that's a brilliant thing about, year one, sunstroke, year two, hypothermia. The best kind of, very simple metaphor for doing outdoor work in Ireland. But then you kind of, Lane Productions emerged, and like within a very short time, there was, I mean, it didn't emerge, but like a very short time, there was a lot of great work kind of from that company.
Yeah. So when it was around 2008, Pat Moylan and Breda approached me about working with them in Lane Productions, and it was a big decision for me to make, but I felt, much and all as I had absolutely loved my time in the festival and loved the people involved in it and loved the challenges in it. I felt it was, after 5 years, time to do something different. And Pat and Breda just got the rights to Shawshank Redemption, and they'd asked me to come in as a partner in the company to work with them on that and other productions as well. So I decided to go for that, and so I was going back into theatre, where I'd kind of been out of it for a few years. But it doesn't leave you, and I had still been involved in theatre with the festival and worked with a number of people, present work during that. So that was another chapter then that opened, and that was equally enjoyable and thrilling and difficult and all those things. But it kind of reintroduced me to theatre, which I really enjoyed and liked. But it was seismic because I was moving away from working with a subsidy, which I'd been heavily involved in through both the festival and through China. And I had worked in the department for a while as an advisor to John O'Donoghue. He was the arts minister. And so this was quite opposite then, going to work in a company with none of that.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to do that. And I remember a certain presenter in RTE saying to me, are you mad? Are you, like, this is at the start of a recession. Are you absolutely, you must be mad doing this. And I kind of went, yeah, I must be. But I just believed in what I was doing, and I believed in what's possible, and I don't regret it at all. And so after a few years then with Lane, I think the three of us kind of decided it was becoming more difficult during the recession to keep a company going, keep 3 people employed, with obviously with no subsidy and whatever. So I set up my own company then. I was asked to do a show in the Burlington Hotel, actually, and for their summer season. And the hotel was in a very funny place. It was kind of partly in Nama and whatever. So I set up the company as a protection for me to do that. And then that went fine. It went really well. And then I just thought, well, I might as well just put all the work I get, because sometimes your work is as they want you, the person, and then sometimes you need a company. And so just from there, I just started putting all my work into the one entity, into Verdant, and then from there on I went. And so that's again quite mixed, because it could be It could be the one-man show to the bigger scale show to partnerships to so many different ways to do it.
I think, I mean, that is, as you say, like, you know, people talk about the independent sector now and, you know, the problems within it, and rightly so. But I mean, for you to have made that back, you know, in 2008, 2009, step from a highly subsidized wage salary position, you know, and to make that jump is a massive thing. And then, you know, for the three of you to cut yourself loose in recessional times. And what's brilliant about it is you look back, and looking back when, you know, on your CV, but it was getting to talk to you. And even though I've known you for years, you kind of go, Jesus Christ, the breadth of the work, but also, as you say, from highly commercial potential to one person shows to something. And that's, I mean, you know, there's a lot there in the work that you've done, and maybe it's worth starting from maybe a bit of madness a year into your producing on Anglo, which you know, you've done stuff with Dave McStavish and obviously Corey McIntyre and, you know, Peter Sheridan in the first year, but then Anglo must have been a ride of all rides done.
It was. It was the nearest thing to a site-specific roller coaster theatre show with no helmet and no protective gear on. The ultimate white knuckle ride that you could possibly have taken. And if we knew now, if we knew then what we know now, but it was enjoyable in that. I mean, first of all, Paul's writing and Paul's take on it was, I mean, it was unbelievably funny. I mean, to get the Aran Islands and develop them and have a light rail system on it, because all of the money was coming from Anglo, was unbelievable, and so farcical. It was so funny. Michael Cavan did a really good job as well. I mean, an amazing cast. I mean, 5 of the cast that were in that show ended up in the West End afterwards in commitments, and you know, but the difficulties then obviously on the legal perspective, you know, every day there was a meeting. We'd get a letter from the Chief State Solicitor's Office, a letter from Sean Fitzpatrick's solicitors, and in the end, nothing actually came of it. And I know I don't want to sound trivial about that, but I suppose it was an incredibly nervous time for everybody. And you know, there were court cases pending, and that's what we were being made aware of, that we weren't allowed to make any commentary necessarily that would impinge on a court case. And that's, you know, it's a serious enough thing, you know, that you don't want to be the person or company or entity that made a balls of it, you know, and of any judicial system, you know. So it's quite onerous in some regards, but you know, we took all the good legal advice, you know, that we should have taken and did take, and we took all the necessary steps with the production as well. And then it was revived then actually in the Olympia then some months later, and it was an even better show. Actually, David Horan got involved at that stage, and a bit of recasting as well, and it really was an even better show. I think often with any show, the chance that it gets to kind of breathe and connect and live, it often is the better for it. And certainly in the case of Anglo, I mean, there was one stage where Jonathan Ryan was doing Brian Cowan, you know, and he had this speech where most of the words were undecipherable, like going forward, and literally 15 minutes later the audience were still laughing from that. So great memories, a lot of great people, and in truth, probably was a bit ahead of its time, but there you go. You know, you don't know that at the time, you know. But I think as well, having done it, then years later when we did Coppers, we, you know, it was pretty much the same, a lot of the same team, a lot of the same people, and we had learned a lot from it, and I think that stood to us. And I'm not sure that Coppers, which has been very, very successful, we would have been able to make the decisions that we made, and we did make some critical decisions in making the show that helped it. We probably wouldn't have been able to make them if we hadn't done Anglo.
Yeah. And Donal, in relation to that, I mean, obviously you mentioned earlier on about the different ways you're involved with work, and some of them obviously you're involved as a kind of creative producer, an executive producer, and I mean, is it? I'm always fascinated by the way teams are set up. Do you know what I mean? That kind of there's a kind of how those boundaries and parameters are kind of set up. And I think, one of your great skills is like you're great at, you strive for the clarity around that. Do you know what I mean? Because things can get very, very, very muddy in the arts sometimes, particularly in the development of bigger shows. Is that something that you kind of strive for at the very outset of a gig?
Yeah, it's important to know who's doing what and who's doing what job, and yeah, I mean, we'd spend a bit of time on that at the start, but also all the way through it. It's like anything. It's like any relationship, things also change and evolve, and if it's for the better, if it's going to make the production better and make the whole management of it better, great. How do we do that? How do we go with that? And that's not being lazy. It's actually being smart, and it's playing everybody to the best of their skills and the best of their talents on and off the stage. There's no prizes for who comes up with the funniest line for the marketing campaign. If it works, it works, and then also just making it easy for the people on and off the stage to deliver what they have to do, because ultimately they're after what they believe to be the best thing. So you're trying to make that always manageable and possible with the resources they have, and so, yeah, there's always a kind of negotiation that happens. But very, in a simplistic form as I can put it, if you surround yourself with brilliant people, it makes your job easier. And if you give those people the right to have the time of their lives making the work, it again makes your job easier, and it's infectious. Talk about things that are infectious at the moment. I mean, what we do is infectious. When something connects with an audience and really lands with them, be that laughter or be it tears, it stays with you. Like, there's moments in theatre that I remember way back 30 years, 40 years, 1 year, Juno and the Paycock in the Gate would be an example. Vividly remember the opening night, vividly remember performances in it. Michael Gambon again in the Gate in Interplay, vivid memory of that. And also just simple stuff like, lines that were delivered or notes that were hit or just reactions from audiences, So yeah, try and make it easier. Try not to make it difficult, because it is difficult. If it was that easy, everyone would be doing it. But it's not. It's not easy. It isn't easy. And so what you have to try and do is try and make it as easy and enjoyable for everyone. And you've got a chance then. You really have a chance, And if you take another route, let's make this complicated and difficult. Okay, what's that about? That can connect badly then, I think, all around. And if you're not landing it in total, the audiences are amazing. They have antennas that go up, and they sense things. They sense if something isn't quite connecting or joined up. It's important that people kind of work as that unit, right the way from the front of house right to the back of the stage. Everyone working for the same thing is quite unique. It is really unique.
Yeah, I think I'm going to kind of cherry pick probably a few shows to kind of chat about. Like, it's striking, like, the remount or the not remount, the new production of Alona Stands, kind of that kind of really hit, and ran in, I think it's 2013. That must have been, again, I mean, you love a sport, obviously, but also the connection that show has with an audience that mightn't be necessarily your normal theatre audience as well. That must have been a very exciting time to see that happen again, was it?
Yeah, it was, and I hadn't worked on the show before, and John came to me and asked me to do it, and so it was a whole new cast and probably a somewhat different approach, and so I again have vivid memories. Like, it was the first time I'd worked with Stephen Jones, who was fantastic, and we've worked an awful lot since then. And also, I think the perception thing with sport, shows about sport and audiences, that it isn't actually, all the ruggerheads went to see the show. Actually, they didn't. In truth, they didn't, because, guys who play rugby don't go to shows. They really don't. They might get dragged along, under duress. Really, the audience were the general public, who knew it was really good and a really good story, really well told and quite inventive and creative in the way it was delivered. And so that was great to see. And it wasn't a huge surprise to me that the rugby clubs are trying to get people into the clubs. They're not trying to get them into theatres, So, and that's the same for any sporting club. So there is a perception that do a show about soccer, all the soccer heads will come. It isn't actually the case. If it's good, everybody will come. And so why limit yourself as well? Why go after just one segment of a market? You know, actually make it so that everybody can see it and enjoy it and get something out of it. And it works both ways, that people can realize then the things about sport. What's clever with the way John wrote Alone It Stands is, you know, stuff like when they were packing down in the scrum and the comments and things that are made, and, you know, probably stuff that most people would never hear because you don't even hear it at a match, you know, shocking and appalling, but true and accurate at the same time. Yeah, it was a great show to do. And I wonder now, now that we have actually beaten the All Blacks, Ireland have, and you know, we seem to be somewhere near able for them now. You know how relevant the show is, but it's on the junior cert, you know, which is fantastic, you know, because it is a great story. It's an amazing story in Irish history, regardless of whether it was a sporting story, you know, and so accurate and so funny, and a lot of great people, you know, who were involved at the start. I wasn't there, but, you know, particularly like someone like Jerry McCann, I think, was involved, and that, you know, great legacy of his, I think. And I think TP, Paul Mead, Carl Quinn, you know, so a lot of great people involved in it then and throughout the years that made it what it is, you know.
As Gassi mentioned, he worked with us in Access on the national tour of Departing Glass as well. So, you know, it's kind of, and again, you're right, the perception, you know, that people involved with sports go to sports shows, they don't, but it's kind of the trick is how to leverage that into a much wider field. Donal, can I ask you about then kind of the next year, because like just looking at 2014, it kind of was like, my God, how did you know, there was plates spinning there. It was like, and the amount of shows that kind of went on in that year kind of just really jumped out at me, like from Borstal Boy to, you know, a couple of Peter shows to Geraldine Aaron to, you know, on and Jim Nutt. Like that's busy.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a bit like that. I think even like, if you go back to earlier, when I was in school, I was working in shows at night, and, you know, catching up with my sport in the meantime as well, you know. So I like to be busy and I like to have things on. So I don't, I consider what I do to be privilege and an amazing profession to be in. So why would I not want to absorb myself in it to the fullest extent and get to work with like absolutely incredible people who are brilliant at what they do, but also just great people, you know, and also then getting to meet the public and get their views and opinions. So I don't see it as a hardship, but yeah, it can be tricky the way sometimes dates collide, and again, surround yourself with great people, and it doesn't seem so bad, and remember to enjoy it as well. But yeah, you get years like that. You just get years where stuff all lands, and other years where maybe you have gaps, and it's not always possible to plan it, you know, exactly right the way you might like it to be. So you just get your best team in place and get the best people around you, and you know, clearly you can't be bilocating too much, but yeah, I get as much out of doing a big, say, spectacle type show in Gaiety Olympia or Port Gosh as I do out of getting a one-man show in the Viking or in the Axis, or, you know, but both are valid, and you need both, you know.
And the last few years, the big shows like 2016 Sydney Trees, obviously, you know, with UCD and kind of Kilmainham, that was an amazing show, and we had it here to kind of as a preview or a kind of a dress rehearsal piece. But the scale of that in the context within it was, you know, and the amount of extraordinary writers that were involved in that must have been an extraordinary piece to be involved in.
It was an unbelievable piece of work to be involved in, and it was so difficult. So very grateful to UCD, Hillish O'Brien in particular, who's head of public affairs, asked me to get involved, and Patrick was directing it, Patrick Mason, and Patrick, you know, lectures at UCD as well, and he was kind of part dramaturg, I think, on the whole event. And you know, staging it in Kilmainham was, you know, not without its challenges. It is a monument. People forget that. It is a national monument, and that brings with it certain responsibilities and difficulties. And of course, the year that was in it, being 16, there was such a pull. I mean, the queues were halfway to Galway looking for the tours to get into Kilmainham in the first place. But an amazing place to be in. And actually, it was one of those mad stories. So there was a lot of negotiation with the OPW with regard to getting access to rehearse it, to tech it, to run it. Initially, I think we wanted something like 3 weeks, and what we got was quite different. And I understand they have responsibilities, and they've got staffing issues, and they were also getting work done in the restaurant, and new ticketing systems coming in. So it was very difficult, and probably their busiest year as well. But we managed to find a way after months of negotiations, and worked very closely with Tommy, who was the caretaker in Kilmainham as well. And it was towards the end of the run. In fact, on the last day, we finished our last show in Kilmainham on Easter Sunday. And I'd just been around with my parents that morning, and they were asking me, how is the show going? And I was saying, yeah, it's gone really well, and public are enjoying it, and it's been very difficult. And said, oh yeah, and why was that? I said, well, look, it's a monument in OPW and whatever. And said, but your granduncle Eamon Martin, sure, he was the chairman of the restoration committee for Kilmainham Jail. And I'm going, now you fucking tell me. Now you tell me. After 3 months of tricky negotiations, my granduncle, my great granduncle Eamon Martin, was the chair of the restoration committee, because they were going to knock it down, I think, in the 50s, because it was just it bore such an eyesore to people, and it brought up such bad memories. But I think we're all glad that they haven't, because it is an amazing building to be in. I mean, it's an incredible tour. So yeah, to know then that I had a relation who was involved in chairing the restoration of it was came late, but nice to have. But I do remember the last night there, when the Shane O'Reilly played Joseph Mary Plunkett, and he's the last of the 8 pieces, and his piece finishes, and it was a very, probably the slowest fade to black that I've ever seen in any show. And it felt like about 20 minutes before the audience applauded. It was just the most unbelievable pause and silence that I'd ever heard in anything, and a magnificent performance, of course, by Shane and by all of the cast. But it was just haunting, absolutely haunting, to be in the place on Easter Sunday, 100 years after it all happened, and just dead silence by the end of it. And then, of course, there was an eruption of an applause. But thankfully, thanks to Patrick and a great cast and stage management and production team, we managed to be able to convert the show to stage as well, and people still enjoyed it. But yeah, it provided unbelievable, memorable moments, truly memorable moments throughout the whole thing. It was great. It was an absolute privilege to be involved.
And one of those small shows that you said, when I did that in small one-person shows, Michael Morpurgo's Private Peaceful took off then, kind of, and ended up off Broadway. The incredible journey on that.
It was an unbelievable journey, and I'm so grateful to, it was Tim Smith who used to work with Druid. Tim, when I worked with Druid in 2002, I was there in a kind of an intervening period, and I did 2 shows: The Good Father by Christian O'Reilly and Side by John McKean. And I was the person who brought Tim over from the UK to work in stage management on Druid at the time, and we kept our relationship going. He subsequently moved to the States, and so he had worked with Simon Reed, who did the adaptation and directed it. And I read it and just flew through one of those scripts, just flew through it and thought, yeah, this works. And it was the timing as well. And so we didn't get a grant written for it, but we just went to the various venues and put together a package that worked. We got two great strokes of luck. One in casting Shane O'Regan, who gave a really memorable and terrific performance, which was recognized in the reviews from in the States were just incredible, and then the other thing was, it ended up the book was on the junior cert that year, because again it was in the lead up to the centenary of the end of World War I or the start of World War I can't remember, but that was a great break too. So the plan was always to bring it to America, so it was one of those things where it worked. Everything worked. We had a great team. Everyone worked well for each other. I don't remember any major issues. And then we played it on an off-Broadway run for a couple of months, and then into Chicago for a month, Philadelphia. And and then we came back, I think we played the Gaiety, and did another load of tour dates as well. And it was a beautiful story, incredibly well told. And Michael Morpurgo is great. He very clear in terms of what he wants with any particular show, and right down to props and things, and the simplicity of it. It is storytelling, and he's a fantastic storyteller himself, and he just is able to connect stories to people very easily. But the live performance of it by Shane, and the production values that came with it, I think really connected with people. And if anyone was ever thinking of starting a war, any world leader thinking of starting a war, I'd say you need to see Private Peaceful and Saving Private Ryan, and then tell me now you still want to start your war. Tell me you still want to start it, But great pleasure, absolute pleasure to be involved.
And Donal, the last couple of years, I mean, there's been loads. I mean, obviously you worked with Jimmy Murphy's plays, and you kind of toured Class, and were involved in some magnificent work. But Coppers kind of has been an anchor, and like, I suppose for that, I mean, obviously you expect and want something to be successful, but when that exploded in the way that it did, I mean, that was there a kind of like, yeah, how does that feel? That kind of wave. What point do you recognize that this is going?
Yeah, the first laugh from the audience on the first preview. Within 10 seconds, the first laugh came, and it was like a tidal wave, and it didn't stop, and it just went through, and it just was this tsunami of laughter, and that came with that first performance. And again, I go back to how infectious that can be, but a cast that were bomb-proof. I could drop an atomic bomb on that cast, and they'd still get up. They'd be up the next day. They are incredible. The way they deliver time and time again. They take such pride in what they do, and they're so professional and so committed. They leave nothing behind them when they go out on that stage, and the audience are literally blown away by that sheer, exuberism and just enthusiasm, and then to have laughter and music surrounded by it as well. It's just such a tonic. It's such a tonic, and again, a pleasure for me to be involved in it, and to work with that many great people, to watch them do their thing. It's an absolute pleasure to see that. It really is. So, and I think audiences, again, just really know that and connect with it, and it just obliterates, even some of the more cynical people that have seen it are kind of going, yeah, that's great fun. I had a great time, and it takes a lot. And I wouldn't say any of that is, and it wasn't. It was not an easy birth. I'd certainly say that, but very, very taken by the spirit of everybody involved in it, on and off the stage, and that is what it takes. The commitment from everybody, and the sheer enthusiasm and talent, absolute talent. And it's one of the things that probably isn't recognised so much here, is the talent in musical theatre, isn't and it should be. It should be funded by the Arts Council. I mean, if the National Theatre in London can do Oklahoma and Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, I mean, what is so wrong with supporting musical theatre here? I mean, as I said to you earlier, the amount of people that end up in the West End from here, I mean, it's mind-numbing how many of them do, and it's not an accident. They get there because they're really good, So I would love to see more musical theatre work. It doesn't always have to be massive, in terms of scale, but I would love to see much more musical theatre work around theatres in Ireland. And it's a great binder, and it doesn't have to be people. I think people here diss it a bit because they think it's all light and frothy and whatever. No, I mean, I saw London Road in the National a few years ago, that Rufus Norris directed, who's now the director, and it was about a serial killer in Ipswich who killed all these prostitutes on London Road in Ipswich. It was stupendous. I thought it was one of the best shows I had seen, and it wasn't gory, it wasn't unbelievable, it was just told in a very naturalistic way, and it wasn't sing-songy music, but it was music, and it was performed, but it was incredible. I mean, it really was. And in the same way that sometimes with Stephen Sondheim's work too, it's quite theatrical, but makes massive demands of the performers that, you'd nearly need to be at a level of opera with heavyweight champion actor to deliver it, really challenging and really needs support. So I would be utterly advocating that musical theatre gets more support. And I think if people engaged in it, you know, and got their hands on it more, they'd understand why it delivers. It really does deliver an awful lot more.
It always struck me at its heart about Irish art form, because it mines all our kind of music, singing, theatre. I agree with you. I think it's a space not explored. I think it becomes very naturally to an Irish practitioner who holds those things.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to look at the number of Irish people, artists on the West End, you know, Killian Donnelly in when I saw him in Commitments, he was amazing, but he's gone on to play the lead in Les Mis and Phantom, you know. But I remember even way back when I was very lucky to see the original production of Les Mis in the Barbican, which was like about 10 hours long. But Colin Wilkinson played Jean Valjean, and I mean, an all-star cast, you know. So it goes right back. It really does. And it's astounding that it doesn't get that level, because there are so many people here. And if you look at the amount of stage schools that are here, a lot of those kids go to the UK. Some of them train over there again and end up in work over there. But also, apart from the performers, then the musicians that we have here, we have amazing, you know, ability of musicianship here, and really more should be given. That I'm always amazed that between, you look at the writers that we have and you look at the musicians that we have, and they seldom meet. They seldom meet, you know. And so that would be a great, for me, aspiration for the future, that some of the great writers could meet with some of the musicians to deliver something memorable. I don't see why not, because we do have the people to do it. You know?
Yeah. So, in relation to that kind of audience, I think you're involved with Second Age as well. You know, and I think you have a relationship with kind of Paul Mead and different guys over the years as well. But I mean, Second Age at their peak were an incredible company, and in my view, hugely underestimated for the aesthetic and the artistic. I've seen some Second Age productions that would stand beside anything done in Irish theatre. But I think what was brilliant about them is the hordes of teenagers, you know, going to them, and the benefit both theatrically and from a Shakespeare point of view. You know, I think that company has never got the accolades it should have.
Couldn't agree more with you. I mean, it's easy to talk about the numbers. You know, in its day at peak, if Second Age was doing a piece of Shakespeare, you'd be looking at audiences in the region of 24,000 people. You know, it dropped down to 6,000 by the time the company finished, and it just wasn't sustainable. You know, one of the most difficult things that any actor or indeed creative team can do is to create a piece of Shakespeare and make it believable. And particularly for a young audience, it's a very difficult audience to make a piece of work for, that they walk away and remember it. But the things that I hear most about Second Age are audiences who step forward who go, well, the first time I was in a theatre was when I went to see a Second Age show. And then the second thing I hear is actors who say, well, the first job I got was with Second Age, you know. So it did provide a massive platform for an awful lot of people on and off the stage. And I thought the general standard of work that the Second Age produced was, I agree with you, very, very high. I remember in the latter years seeing, you know, David Parnell, amazing production of Many Miles to Babylon. David Horan doing a magnificent production of Dancing with Lunasa. Both, I mean, in fact, I was actually negotiating with the company at the time to put that production in the Gaiety. It was that strong, that production of Lunasa. And Shakespeare is incredibly difficult to do. It really, really is. It takes every sinew out of you to do it well. And I think they did, in the main, do it very well and had good people. Badly missed, and I would say missed by the schools. But, you know, things change, people change, countries change, we all change, things evolve, move on. You know, I would say the vision for a company like that would be, if you were able to produce it at the level that it was at, but you could also work for, you know, primary level, for third year, for university level as well. What if actors got their hands on the poetry syllabus and delivered poetry to students? What would the results be there? You know, what would happen with Irish language? What would happen with STEM or STEAM, with science? You know, I mean, the results for a company that would properly resource to do all those things could be phenomenal. Yeah. And that would be particularly for the students who emerge with that sense of where theatre and creativity can bring you. And you know, again, it's theatre, it's creativity, it's innovation. And these are things that for younger people, that's what they thrive on. That's what they want. That's what they need. I mean, you'd like to think they're getting it still, but I do think the Second Age delivered on that very, very well. But it was very hard on the resources that were there in a market that was constantly changing.
Yeah, no, I mean, having been heavily involved in team theatre over the years, many different levels, I think systems change, but I do think there's a massive gap left in our cultural infrastructure from, say, both team and Second Age, and companies kind of like that. But I do agree there's innovations there to be explored. Donal, before I let you go, I'm just interested in, how do you eke out things? What's your radar? You know, do you just read voraciously? Do you, what sort of stuff
I wasn't a great reader for years, and I have become a better reader over the years. And generally it starts with a story. I suppose selfishly, you have to have some interest in it, and it has to move me in a certain way myself to kind of think, I think people need to hear that story. I think people want to hear that story, or I think they want that told to them in that particular way, be it through contemporary dance or be it through opera or regular theatre. So there has to be things that kind of move you and connect with you emotionally, really. And, you know, that can come from many resources, from it, be it a book that you read or something from your memory, maybe, that you connect with, that you think that's worth revisiting. But also, it's not just about me. I think that's the important thing. And I think we do make that mistake sometimes in Ireland, is that often things can be, you know, very inward looking. And I like to hear where other people are with things and help them deliver on that. So some people will come to you with a particular idea, vision for a story or a piece of work, and working with them and navigating your way to, first of all, getting it into a point where it's possible, then making it deliverable. You know, that it's a great journey. It's an amazing journey to take. And again, it is a privilege to do it. So I don't have one fast rule about doing it. And I think also revisiting work as well that was previously produced is something that we're not very good at, that we should. I mean, I think we should look at that. I mean, we've had, you know, very good work over the years, and some of it does not stand up, I will say. Absolutely. There are some, you know, some work that does not maybe feel as relevant or as important now. It's not to say it won't be in the future. But a lot of it is, and a lot of it works. A lot of it has worked before, so why would it not work again? And it's not, it's that thing of having a decent spread of work, so you're not always invested in what was done before. And it's important to really celebrate what we did before. But, you know, I heard a term by a business guy who talked about remembering the future. How do we remember the future? Because we often talk about remembering the past, you know, but we have to remember what is the future, and where do we see that, you know? And so I think people are amazing the way they are able to land on sometimes something that's quite niche and you know, a buried story that can emerge but really connect. I mean, if you even look at, say, the Tom Crean story, and how that, you know, maybe wasn't the story of that particular travel, but it's become a story, and it's a question now for people. It's like, you know, people have to see it. They have to get their fix of it. You know, they have to get that inside them to remind them of how things are possible and achievable, you know. And so I think that's what you're always striving for, is to get into people's memory, that they walk away with those moments. And that's where we're at our best, is infiltrating people's brain cells with really good things that make them feel good, and make them, and sometimes help them understand things, or feel better about things, or feel better about each other. We're brilliant at that. And that's what we will get back to doing, you know. And so, you know, when you get inspired by, say, like, Signatories was an easy one, because you know, it was just such a great idea with great people. But so have so many, you know, I mean, Brothers of the Brush, great piece of work. It had never been done since the time it was done at the Abbey. Incredible. Like, it was nearly 20 years since it was first done, and it had never been touched. Great play. Still absolutely relevant. Still relevant, you know. And so that was a pleasure to do and revisit it. The Geraldine Aaron, My Brilliant Divorce, who did that with Tara Flynn. I think we had it with yourselves as well. It's a great story, just a really good story, but told from a very personalised perspective. So I think when Druid did that originally, it was with Glenn Headley, and then They did it with I think it's not with Druid, but Gary directed Dawn French in London in that as well. You know, so and that was a really interesting perspective to hear. It's a story that was kind of well told. Nearly feels like television, actually. You know, but yeah, there's no particular rule, but I yeah, it's nice to hear these different voices, not just from my perspective, from other people's perspective, and often I get, you get a lot of approaches from people that have ideas and want you to work with them. So not always possible to do all of them, but it's good to give people some time. I'm happy to do that, because even if you don't necessarily run with it, something will come from it anyway. You know, you make a good connection with somebody. You maybe don't work in that project, but maybe you will in the future.
Donal, thanks so much for starting this. It's been a joy as always chatting to you. And my brain will forever have the branding of the Shiels sisters in my head now.
Yeah, it was Noel Pearson who said it. You know, he said, "Well, the Shield sisters are straight, are they?" That was way back, but yeah, it was kind of funny. But it was good times too. But thanks, Mark, and thanks for Access, and thanks for everything that it stands for. And it's great to be able to pop up, not far from where I am. It's always great to pop up and see work there. And long may it last.
Cool, brilliant, Donal. Thanks a million.
All right, take care, Mark. Cheers.